Hi, I'm Yegi. I'm an entrepreneur and success coach who wants it all. Family, luxury, career, and the freedom to do whatever I want, whenever I want. And I'll do whatever it takes to get there. I created the Yegi Project to document my journey and inspire others to do the same. My mission is to change the world by influencing and leading others to do what they love and live fulfilled lives. Hello. Welcome back to the Yegi Project. Today's honored guest is Dr. Barry Krakow, who is a sleep medicine specialist. He has over 3 decades experience in clinical practice and research in this area. He is currently doing innovative sleep coaching. He has a book about this topic and is also a professor at Mercer University, where he can help advance sleep medicine and mental health treatments. Dr. Krakow, please go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us who you are, what do you do, and how did you get in this field of work?
Thank you very much for having me on the program. I look forward to a good, healthy discussion that won't put anybody to sleep. My background is I was trained in internal medicine and then did some work in emergency medicine and finally developed a career in sleep medicine starting in 1988 and began working with mental health patients who had the problem of chronic nightmares. We developed an innovative treatment for people with nightmares without having to use medication. And from there I got involved very heavily into the field of sleep medicine. And what we learned going forward was that most people with mental health problems have sleep problems. And it turns out that if you can help them sleep better, their mental health gets better, which is a very big deal. And so this applies really to many people because not everybody has to have a mental health problem, but people do suffer from anxiety and depression and insomnia. And it turns out if you address these sleep problems, you're going to have a more active, productive, and more satisfying life.
Oh, I definitely can agree on that from personal experience. So my husband suffers from having anxiety, and that leads to him not getting good sleep. And for me, I'm a mother of 3 young children, and I've recently learned how important sleep is and how it could throw off everything when sleep is not there. So I can only imagine if we are talking about sleep and how it correlates to our behavior overall as a functioning human, what a big impact you're having in this world. And actually, I'm very intrigued to have this conversation with you because a lot of times we are just kind of prescribed medicine, right? And we don't know the background. And I really want to pick your brain about the research you've done and what you've learned about the root cause of our sleep issues, right?
The point you're making is fantastic because sleep is very much disrespected in society. It's very much disrespected in the field of medicine and healthcare. Surprisingly, it's somewhat disrespected in mental health because, as you say, people are only offered a medication. They're not given a chance to say, tell me why I'm not sleeping. Tell me what's wrong with my sleep. Tell me how I can fix and repair the things that are wrong with my sleep. People don't get that opportunity. The doctor pulls out a prescription pad. That's the end of the story. So it's a tremendous amount of disrespect and discounting because people are very ignorant about sleep. And there's so much knowledge in my new book, Life-Saving Sleep, New Horizons in Mental Health Treatment. We show all of the work that we've done over the last 30 years, how individual sleep disorders, like somebody could have nightmares, somebody else could have insomnia, someone else has poor sleep quality. There's problems called restless legs and leg jerks. There's the big global problem of, well, I don't sleep well, or I wake up a lot. All of these things have specific causes. All of them can be treated. And the largest majority of this stuff can be treated without medication. So that's good news.
Wow.
The problem
That's
is people,
great news.
but the people don't know that this is out there. So it's
Well,
great
that's
that we're
why
having
we're
this
having
broadcast.
this conversation.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, now let's dive in. Let's break all those up. So just like I like to compare it to exercise because recently the same thing with meditation. A lot of people say meditation and they think that's one type of thing, right? Same thing exercise. There's one they think, okay, you just have to go and sweat. No, there's many different types. And what you're saying is the same thing with sleep problems or sleep issues or sleep disorders. Now, can we break that down a little bit? So I know you've done research and you've worked on a program called Turning Nightmares into Dreams. Can we start there? So let's start with nightmares, then we'll progress.
That's a great place to start because that's where I started my career. I began working with psychiatrists at the University of New Mexico Department of Psychiatry in 1988. We developed this technique called imagery rehearsal therapy. And what is unique about this part of the program is that if you think about everything before the 1990s, about chronic nightmares, and even to this day, again, because people tend to take a long time to digest new information, absorb it, and actually apply it. Most people think nightmares must mean there is something going on with you psychologically that could only be resolved by getting psychotherapy or, again, getting on a medication. So what we proved in the 1980s and 90s was that you can use a cognitive imagery technique where you talk to somebody about what's going on in the nightmare. You talk about what we call rescripting or reimagining this nightmare while you're awake. And it turns out that if you practice new images in your mind's eye while you are awake, that has an impact on your disturbing dreams at night. So we published this data all through the 1990s, and in 2001, it was the lead article in JAMA because we did a study on sexual assault survivors with post-traumatic stress disorders who had chronic nightmares. And nobody expected their nightmares to get better because they had PTSD. They said, well, where's the medication? Where's the psychotherapy? We said, well, we don't use that. We use this technique called imagery rehearsal therapy. So not only did their nightmares get better, but their PTSD got better. And this was the first published study that actually demonstrated that if you treat a sleep disorder, you can actually make PTSD better. So that was groundbreaking work.
Yes,
and that's what got us started off in our career when we or in this whole journey, realizing that you can take every sleep disorder, and if you can find a treatment for it besides medication, you're likely to make anxiety, depression, PTSD get better. And many other people have repeated this research. We now know you treat sleep, mental health gets better.
Wow, so you are actually finding the root cause instead of just kind of putting a band-aid on it in a way, like with medication. You're finding the root cause to that sleep issue, and it's solving the problem that you may not even know that's the cause of it.
Correct.
Now, can you talk a little bit about the actual treatment itself? What is the IRT? What do you guys do? Are you hooked up to a machine? Am I in a scanner?
It's so much more simple than that. It's something, as I like to say, is a therapy that's got to be probably close to, I'm going to go for 2,000 to 4,000 years old.
Wow.
It's when somebody had a bad dream and they went to grandpa or grandma and they said, well, I had this bad dream. And grandpa and grandma said, well, why don't you just change that dream and picture it in your mind? Picture that new version. You dream what you want to dream. And I think your nightmares are going to get better. In fact, somebody did that study in the 1930s with children. It was called auto-suggested dreaming. He said to them, well, tell me what you want to dream about that's better than your nightmare. So they gave them some examples. They dreamed it, and their nightmares got better. So IRT is the technical term for imagery, meaning the mind's eye, rehearsal, meaning you take the new images and you practice them in your mind's eye while you're awake. And then therapy, of course, is that the fact that this has a therapeutic effect and actually alters the imagery in your mind while you're sleeping. So it's a
Wow, the
wonderful
power of the
component
mind.
of the way our Creator made the mind work, that it has this capacity.
Wow, honestly, that's amazing. I'm so intrigued with our mind and our brain. It's just crazy the power we have over it, and a lot of us are not even aware of that. And this is a great example for me to be like, I want to test this theory with my husband. Actually, he has sleep issues, so it's amazing that you guys are able to put it into research and get solid results and facts and numbers to, to show the results.
Right.
Now, going back to the different sleep disorders, now you've also focused on a lot of people with PTSD, veterans. Can you talk a little bit about that, and how can somebody get help to improve their sleep?
Right. So what you're saying segues into how we actually learn so much more than we expected. Being what I would call open-minded researchers, we went into this thinking, okay, well, can nightmares really be treated? And it turns out they can be, so that was good news. But we had no idea what we were going to find, which was that nightmares were the tip of an iceberg. What do I mean by that? Most PTSD patients, it turns out, do complain of sleep problems. Number one issue might be nightmares, but another big issue is insomnia. So those PTSD patients are thinking, well, that's why they're giving me the pills, because I have insomnia, so I must get sleeping pills. But there's a third issue, and this is where the framework is so important to understand. Most people think, because of what we've talked about so far, or because of their own knowledge base, that sleep is all about psychological processes. But that's not true. Sleep is fundamentally biological. So that means you've got a psychological component to your sleep problems, and you've got a physiological component. We didn't really appreciate that. When we were treating these PTSD patients all through the 1990s, we kept seeing over and over again they had sleep apnea. And we're going, wait, what's going on here? They have insomnia, they have nightmares, that's psychological, but they also have sleep apnea. That's physiological. What's going on? And to this day, this is still something that is quite revolutionary, because most people in the field of PTSD research who know something about sleep know that PTSD patients have a very high rate of sleep apnea. But nobody on the planet actually has proven why they have so much sleep apnea. And so that's a little bit problematic, because if you don't know why, unfortunately, it holds some people back thinking, well, if we don't know why they have it, then maybe it's not that important. When in fact it turns out, if you treat a PTSD patient's sleep apnea, you can also improve their PTSD. So all of this stuff comes together into what we call mind-body medicine. So it's very holistic.
Wow. So, sound sleep, sound mind. So that's sleep dynamic therapy, or introduction to it. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it's related?
All right, so Sound Sleep, Sound Mind is the original book that I published in 2008, and that was based on my sleep dynamic therapy model. The new book, which I'll just show for you, Life-Saving Sleep, New Horizons in Mental Health Treatment, that also is a carry forward of sleep dynamic therapy. The idea is what we've just stated. We don't look at somebody as only a psychological being. We don't look at somebody as only a physiological being. We look at the whole person and we say, tell me about all the different sleep elements that you're struggling with, and let's go through them, because it turns out the single biggest factor that drives most sleep problems for most people who have chronic sleep problems is the concept of what's called sleep fragmentation. And sleep fragmentation means the sleep is broken up into little bits all night long, destroying the quality of your sleep. So people used to think it happened, and it still does to some extent. If you suffer from anxiety, depression, PTSD, that will cause some of this fragmentation. But a larger component of the fragmentation is strictly physiological. Again, going back to sleep breathing problems. So sleep breathing, if
Oh,
you think
wow.
about it, is primal. Breathing is primal. There couldn't be another function you have that's more important that you have awareness of. Your heart and your lungs are the two most important organs keeping you alive. And of course your brain says, hey, keep pumping, keep breathing. But the problem is when something goes awry with your breathing, your brain senses it immediately. And so during the night, if you have these breathing disruptions, you have arousals and awakenings hundreds of times during the night. That's sleep fragmentation. That destroys sleep quality. And where this becomes very confusing for people is that when people ask the question of how can I get better sleep, in their mind, they're really asking, how can I get more sleep? But
I
my
see.
question is, you don't want more sleep. You want more better sleep. And there's a
Quality.
huge difference between the two.
So, for somebody who's having this fragmentations, how do you know if you're having it, right? Because you sleep, you wake up restless, and you're not sure why it is. Are you having nightmares? You have
Right.
anxiety? Why are you not getting good quality sleep, in layman's term? So,
Right.
is there tests that you could do? Is there
Absolutely.
like questions a person can ask themselves as a starting point?
Sure, sure. All again covered in the book. But let me explain to you that this is more intuitive than you would imagine. Yes, there's all kinds of tests you can do. But the bottom line is you can figure it out yourself very easily. And
How?
I've got questions in my book that describe this process, so I'll give you some examples. How do you feel when you wake up in the morning?
Tired. Currently.
Okay, but see, you've got 3 kids, so we don't know what's going on there. You may have disruptions during the night. You may not get enough sleep. But in general, when a person finishes a solid night of sleep, they're supposed to feel great. They're supposed to jump out of bed. They don't even need caffeine,
Coffee.
coffee, tea, anything, because their body naturally is able to start over. In other words, let's ask an even earlier question. The brain is doing something to you when you're sleeping. Do you know what that is? It's
No.
called brain washing. There's an actual system in your brain that cleans out the toxic material from your brain. And when you go into deeper sleep, the brain does a better job of cleaning. And so when that happens, that's why you wake up feeling great and creative and energetic and you just want
That's
to
the
seize the
goal,
day.
right?
That's right. So that means for your listeners, if anybody is sitting there thinking, well, I don't wake up feeling that way, that's a huge red flag that something
Huh.
else needs to be investigated. And so there's so many more questions you can ask yourself, but people don't know how to connect the dots. I'll give you another one, which is really wild. Most people think once they get to the age of 40 or above that it's normal to wake up at night and use the bathroom to pee. So most people think that. If you go into a doctor's office, they'll tell you, well, I wake up once or twice a night to pee. They go, well, that's normal. That's not true. It is not normal. It turns out there are things that can go on with this sleep fragmentation that we're describing earlier that can actually cause you to produce more water passing through your kidneys, making your bladder get full faster, and you have to wake up at night to pee. So you go, wait a second, you mean if I fix that, I will not get up at night to pee? Yes. So this is what happens, for example, in sleep apnea. People who use this machine that's called CPAP or PAP therapy, many of those patients stop getting up at night to use the bathroom to urinate. So you go, wait, that's impossible. How can that be that connection? Well, you see, it turns out sleep has all of these connections to your heart, to your brain, to your lungs, to your kidneys. So all of this stuff is in play, and once you read about it, can everybody reads, the internet now and can, do their research. They can buy my book, whatever. You can get all this information and begin to put a puzzle together and say, well,
Wow.
maybe I'm tired because I'm not sleeping well. Maybe I have aches and pains because I'm not sleeping well. Maybe I have a headache in the morning because I'm not sleeping well. The list goes on and on and on. It's phenomenal how much sleep is interconnected with all the systems in the body and mind.
Yeah, and therefore our health, right? So that's the number one place we need to start if we have health issues. That's kind of what I'm understanding from listening to this.
I agree.
So, for anybody who has not read your book, what are your top 5 takeaways for the common person, right? So this book is written for everybody. So I could pick it up, I could read it, I can have
Absolutely.
benefits from it for my sleep. It's not for medical professionals or anything like that. So what are the 5 takeaways if I were to read your book that you would wish your reader would get from it?
So the first part is to focus on this concept of sleep quality and not worry about number of hours of sleep. And ask yourself, can I actually evaluate the quality of my sleep? That process is really also takeaway number 2, that give yourself the time, the patience, the energy, the curiosity to actually say, I really want to know what's the quality of my sleep. Because once a person does that, particularly somebody who's saying, no, I think I have a sleep problem of some sort, that person's going to come away with, oh yeah, there is something wrong with the quality of my sleep. What do I do about it? So then they have to go down the pathway of what we call the interventions. The interventions could be for nightmares. We just described IRT. Another intervention is for insomnia, which is called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. These are all in the book. Another intervention is sleep disordered breathing treatments. And so the last takeaway that I would give is, if you have a sleep quality problem, that means you've got this sleep fragmentation, there's a good chance there's some breathing issues going on. And in the book, I've got 2 different sections that are called early conservative treatment steps. So what does that mean? That means that if I tell somebody to take nasal saline rinses and clean out your nose several times a day, just evacuate the stuff out of your nose, people who have sleep breathing problems within 2 weeks will start to notice they're sleeping better just because they're cleaning out their nose. And so in the book, we have listed all these other conservative steps for how you improve your nasal breathing. In fact, on my website, barrykrakowmd.com, there's a free 1-hour video program. It's 6 lessons on what we call nasal hygiene. And it talks all about why your nasal breathing is so important. And so for somebody who's new to this, they're not quite sure, they want to put their feet in the water, but they're not ready to dive into the deep end and go to a sleep center and get a sleep study and all of that. I paint the picture for this early conservative treatment management, because if you do these simple things and you start noticing you're sleeping better, you're going to be so motivated to do more research and gain more curiosity about what's going on. And here's another one, final takeaway on this point, that let's say you're somebody who has high blood pressure. If your doctor didn't tell you that you have to get a sleep study when you've been diagnosed with high blood pressure, that means that doctor is not up on the research. Everybody who's in the field of sleep knows that sleep apnea causes high blood pressure. And so if you're going around taking all these medicines and your doctor's never told you that, that's an indication. So I describe many of those things in the book about how a person, whether it's a mental health issue, whether it's a physical health issue, the connections are there. And if we raise this awareness, people are eventually going to start to say, well, maybe I should be checking out my sleep.
Yeah, honestly, thank you so much for really bringing this into awareness. And I think it takes a lot of conversations to have that mentality shift of where to start, because it is easy to prescribe a medicine, but a lot of medicine do have side effects. I mean, a lot of people know that. Again, I'm not an expert in medicine, but
the medicines also don't work. They also,
Yes.
the sleeping pill industry is not particularly that effective. It's true, it
Yes.
helps some people, but by and large, there's so many drugs out there, over the counter, prescription, and not, the side effects are horrible, but it's also, they don't work. They're not making the sleep quality problem better.
Yes. Is sleep, I'm just curious, is sleep also related to high cholesterol?
There is many theories now building about how this sleep fragmentation model is so impactful that it's affecting insulin resistance. It's affecting the way you process the food that you take in. It affects your hunger status. It obviously affects your energy level, so you may not exercise. So definitely, if you've heard of the metabolic syndrome, which involves, high cholesterol, many people think that sleep is clearly a risk factor for the metabolic syndrome.
I see. Okay, my next question to you is, we talked about quality of sleep and not the quantity of hours, but also, again, common perception of how many hours of sleep we should be getting. A lot of people say, oh, you have to make sure you get at least 6 to 8 hours, right? So what are your thoughts about the number of hours if, of course, like, we don't have interruptions because of a baby or anything like that, or taking care of a family member? Ideally, how many hours does somebody need to sleep in order to have optimal health? And what's the minimum if somebody wants to be like, hey, I want to be so productive throughout the day, I want to sleep as little as possible to do so?
Well, it's just the opposite. If you want to be super productive throughout the day, get the best possible sleep and the most number of hours of best possible sleep, and you'll be so productive you won't believe it. So
Wow,
it's remarkable what happens once people start sleeping better. But it's a great question. We usually put it into two categories. Let's take the people who are normal sleepers. By normal sleepers, we mean they don't have these interruptions. They don't have sleep fragmentation, no breathing problems, no insomnia, no nightmares. Those individuals, generally speaking, are usually averaging between 6 and 9 hours a night. That's almost all a genetic component. It's like their body is built a certain way. They need this amount of sleep, and it's good sleep. These people are very good sleepers. And by the way, sadly, there are not lots and lots of normal sleepers out there. There's people who think they're normal sleep. Some of them are just big caffeine drinkers, and they forget how awful they really feel and how they need the caffeine for the energy. A normal sleeper, by the way, is somebody who would almost never use caffeine, which is
like a child. I mean, it makes me think about my 2 and 3-year-old. They wake up at 6 a.m. so happy and so excited to start their day.
That's good. That's good. They could be good sleepers. So now when you take the other group, the people who are not the normal sleepers, now it's a different pathway because we already know they're handicapped by the sleep fragmentation problem. So you go like, well, what's the right number of hours? The answer is we don't know. There's no way to know. This person could go 4 hours and go, well, I wake up after 4 hours and I can't get back to sleep. So what do? Well, some people get super frustrated. They get back into bed. They toss and turn. They make the problem worse. Other people get up and start drinking coffee and say, okay, well, I'm just going to go about my day and get my work done. And then they collapse at the end of the day. They get back into bed and they sleep 4 hours again. It's horrible for them. It's not good. It's not healthy. But this is what they've learned because they're an ambitious person that wants to be able to succeed in life. Other people have so much difficulty with the sleep, they can lose their job, they can have marital strife, they can't function, they can't do well in school. And so they're in a place where they're going to be disabled. In fact, we did a study years ago showing that we were looking at a group of people who were in a welfare to work program. This was back in the 1990s. Something like 60% of them had significant sleep issues that clearly must have been affecting their ability to function. So the answer to the question is, you obviously want to try to get as much sleep as you can, but there is something of a threshold here, because what if all you're doing is getting bad sleep? Why do you want to keep getting more bad sleep? And so that person seriously has to take into consideration what is driving this problem? And the answer, again, 90% of the time is a sleep quality issue that has to be looked at. Once the person begins to look at that, I'll give you a personal example for myself, which was when I finally treated my sleep disorders, which began around 1998. I learned, I was shocked, that there were times I could sleep 6 hours a night and function perfectly the next day. There were even times I could sleep 4 and 5 hours in a night and function like at 80–90%. Not that I recommend that. And so it turned out that once I got all my treatments, that my average sleep turned out to be between 6.5 and 7.5. And it's pretty much been like that ever since. So that was very different than what I thought beforehand when I wanted 8, 9, or 10 hours of sleep because I was very tired, during the day.
Wow. Now, can we talk a little bit about anxiety and sleep? A lot of people suffer with anxiety these days, or I meet personally a lot of people who have anxiety for whatever reasons. I don't know if it's just our society nowadays, but
it's our society, guaranteed.
So what would you advise for people who know they have sleep problems due to anxiety?
Well, the big problem with anxiety and sleep largely falls into the category of insomnia. It's more complex than that, but simplistically, when you talk about anxiety, you're usually talking about insomnia, meaning the difficulty falling asleep, the difficulty staying asleep, and of course all the awakenings during the night. For the most part, when you're younger, it's a problem of falling asleep at night. As you age, once you get over 40 in general, it's a problem of being unable to stay asleep. Constant awakenings, and then there's that early morning awakening and you can't get back to sleep. So for both types, anxiety is clearly something that's either going to prevent you from falling asleep, or anxiety is also something that keep awakening you. And so the answer is, how do you treat the anxiety? Do you treat it, for example, with pills? Well, anxiety actually isn't well treated with pills. Anxiety is much better treated with the correct forms of psychotherapy. And in regards to sleep, what's interesting about anxiety and sleep is that in the early phases of your insomnia treatment, the less you focus on your sleep and the less you focus on getting so many hours of sleep, the faster your problem gets better. I'll give you an example.
Interesting.
Most people with anxiety and insomnia might lay in bed for 10 hours, 9 hours, 8 hours. Why? Well, because they want 8 hours of sleep. They want 9 hours of sleep. They're not going to get it, but they think if they're laying there, somehow they're going to get to sleep. They're actually making the problem worse. Because when you lie in bed not sleeping, you're teaching yourself. Well, not only is it frustrating, but you're teaching yourself to be frustrated in your bed and not sleep. You're teaching yourself not to sleep.
Conditioning your body.
That's it, the word conditioning. And so that person in the early phase of insomnia treatment, the first couple of weeks, for some people the first couple of months, they actually want to restrict their time in bed somewhat so that they do get what's called a little bit higher sleep pressure. And so their body naturally gets to midnight and they go, okay, well, now I'm really sleepy. I'm going to get into bed. I'm going to go to sleep. And you know what? I'm going to set my alarm for 6:30. I'm only going to be in bed 6.5 hours. And whatever sleep I get, that's the sleep I get for now. This is best done under the direction of somebody who can explain what's called cognitive behavioral therapy insomnia. They can also get all those instructions in my book. And the point is that you have to learn that you can make your insomnia worse by doing one thing: losing sleep over losing sleep. And so you have to break that cycle. You do not want to be frustrated about your sleep. You do not want to be anxious about losing the sleep, because that causes you to lose more sleep.
I see. Well, it really does make sense. Just like anything, I feel like if we have a problem in any area, if we focus on it too hard, sometimes we put resistance towards it and it just becomes worse, just from my personal experience.
Correct.
Okay, so I want to pick your brain a little bit about routines and things that people can do before bed to kind of wind down, the do's and don'ts, and any advice you have for our listeners that could try to get not necessarily more hours of sleep, but better quality sleep.
Right. So the most important thing about the bedtime ritual is understanding that the day is over. That's the single most important thing. Emotional awareness that your day is over. The day is done. And for a lot of people, especially again in today's society, where nothing is ever over, everything is 24/7, right? Right. And so the person, as they approach the evening hours or the bedtime hours, however their schedule turns out to be, learning to emotionally be satisfied with your day and then doing something that is either what's called non-linear or non-intellectual are two ways to really help a person wind down. For example, puzzles. Puzzles involve the mind's eye, the imagination. It's not the same thing as reading. Reading can be very good for some people, but for others it's a overstimulating, and then you want to just keep reading. But something that allows you drawing, painting, crayons, puzzles, even watching a funny comedy that maybe you've taped. I don't know if you're old enough to remember or know who I Love Lucy is, but if you watch I Love Lucy programs, that changes your whole physiological tension in your body. So that's what your goal is at bedtime. Your schedule that you adhere to is less important than what I've just described. Many people get into this whole sleep hygiene routine. I talk extensively about sleep hygiene in the book because sleep hygiene is often misused. It is not actually a first-line treatment for many people. Working on sleep quality issues is much more important than sleep hygiene. Nonetheless, what people must understand about the routine that's crucial is that your day is done. Emotionally, you have to believe your day is done. And it's really easy to know whether you don't believe that. If you lie down in bed and you have racing thoughts and you can't turn off your mind, that is your brain's way of saying to you, you have unfinished business. And now you need to do what? Get up out of bed and figure out a way, not necessarily to finish that business, but to find reasonable closure on what's bothering you, what you're fretting about. Go to get a piece of paper out, write down some ideas, do a meditation. I strongly encourage prayer as being a very important component. Many religions have prayers of gratitude or forgiveness or both, which are really good things to be thinking about and feeling at the end of the day. And so you go down that pathway, you're setting yourself up for saying, okay, this day is over. I need my rest. I need my sleep. My brain needs to clean all that waste matter out of my cells, my neurons, my tissues. And I want to get so I can have a great day tomorrow. So you know what? I'm willing to close down shop, get into bed, and go to sleep. When a person develops that attitude, and by the way, you should know this, normal sleepers do just what I said.
Yeah.
A normal sleeper, because they already know they're going to get a good night's sleep the next night, they go, oh, well, I can turn that over. I'll just sleep on that. I'll figure that out tomorrow. No big deal. So they're already doing that naturally. And they're, of course, very blessed that they had that normal sleep because that allowed them to develop that routine. In fact, normal sleepers look at those of us with sleep problems and think that we're very weird. They go like, what do you mean? Like, why can't you just get in bed and go to sleep? What's wrong with you? Well, the answer is that those of us who have these problems will want to spend too much time thinking about yesterday, too much time thinking about tomorrow, and then even getting worried about what happened today. All of that stuff doesn't work in the bedroom or in your bed. That stuff has no place being there. That is not part of closing out the day emotionally.
Now, my follow-up question to you is, you said a lot more of us have sleep problems than we know. Is there a rough percentage based on a study of how many percent of people have sleep problems?
Absolutely. The National Sleep Foundation does a poll with the Gallup organization every couple of years. They've been doing it at least a decade, maybe longer, and it's very clear that 2 out of every 3 adults in the United States has some difficulty with sleep. Some of these people are more severe than others, but let me point out the way Gallup asked the questions was very useful because it's talking about regular sleep problems. So I'm not saying how severe the sleep problems are because it doesn't really give that. But it's actually talking about if you have insomnia problems once a week, that's absolutely an insomnia disorder. Nobody should have a problem going to sleep or waking up too much once a week. That's just totally not normal. And so Gallup asked a question like that. Gallup also asked the question about, well, how do you feel when you wake up in the morning? Or how would you rate the quality of your sleep? And again, 2 out of 3 people are saying there's problems with quality, there's problems with the quantity of sleep I get, there's problems with falling asleep, there's problems with waking up too much. It's a very big problem. You think it's so big that the healthcare industry would be interested in it, but it's not.
Wow. So it really, really is a big problem. And I'm so happy we're talking about it today because I think it's such a big problem where it became a norm in our culture. We think it's normal to feel tired. It's normal not to get quality sleep. It's normal to overthink and analyze and have anxiety before sleep. Like it just became the way it is and we don't think about it. And I'm so happy there are people like you who are bringing it into awareness. So again, I want to thank you for your time and your research and your dedication to this topic. But
let me ask you, why do you think somebody invented Red Bull? So energy drinks are part of this whole construct of saying you don't need sleep, you just need energy. If it's not Red Bull, it's going to be Adderall or Strattera or Ritalin. So that's the pathway that pharmacology and healthcare and society goes down because of this discounting and dismissing sleep. Take a normal sleeper who drinks no caffeine, who's on no medications, and lives a very productive, high-energy life, you should be going, well, I want that. You know, I didn't have this before my treatments in 1998. Once I started treating my sleep problems, I realized there's an enormous amount of energy inside the human organism once you're allowed to sleep properly.
Wow. Okay, so some closing questions. Actually, in the beginning of the podcast, I like to ask some random questions just to get to know you better. And we totally skipped over that because we got right into the topic of sleep. So let's go back a little bit. So for really quick, for the listeners who don't know you, is there something that actually most people don't know about you? Some interesting, quirky fact?
Quirky, I don't know about that, but I certainly have enjoyed the game of golf for many decades. Very frustrating. I know that when I treated my sleep problems and some other things, I noticed my golf game got better. So I thought that was a very interesting finding.
Love that. Okay. This next question, I think I know the answer to, but if with a magic wand you can change one thing in the world, what would it be?
Well, that absolutely would be peace in the Middle East.
Awesome. What has been your biggest challenge, and what did you do to overcome it?
My biggest challenge I have not been able to overcome, and that is the fact that the healthcare industry, even the field of sleep medicine itself, has been unable to recognize the importance of all the things we've talked about it. But the one major breakthrough I would add is that right now in Savannah, Georgia, where we moved 4 years ago, we've started a new sleep training curriculum in a psychiatry residency training program. So psychiatrists here are learning how to treat sleep disorders without prescription sleeping pills. So that's a major breakthrough.
How phenomenal.
And we're hoping that that can spread throughout the country and eventually throughout the world.
That would be amazing. Well, all my best with that project, and I will help spread the word. I think it is very much needed in today's society. Now, before we close, can you just tell our listeners where they can find you now, and how can they get help with sleep problems? So if they are thinking, okay, maybe I do have a sleep problem. If 2 out of 3, I feel not rested, I keep waking up, I have all these things, where can they start? And again, where can they find more information?
Sure. Well, I certainly would love for them to buy the book, Life Saving Sleep, because in
Great
there,
place to start.
right, not only are they going to learn lots of ways to diagnose themselves and lots of ways to treat themselves, but they're going to actually learn exactly the terminology for when they might go to a sleep center, because that's a very big deal. Many sleep doctors don't practice the way I've approached the field, and so being able to know that terminology makes it so much easier. The second thing is I run a sleep coaching service. It's largely for people who've had difficulties dealing with sleep centers and not being able to get the right kinds of treatments and the right kind of coaching. But it's also for new individuals who are saying, I've got this really severe case of insomnia. I've been on medications for years. Nobody's been able to help me. And so those are pretty much the two big kinds of cohorts that we work with in the coaching service. The coaching service is at barrycrakowmd.com. On that same website, there's plenty of books and videos, either for sale or for free, that describe various aspects of some of the things we've talked about today. And then the other thing is I have a Substack newsletter, which is free, and it's called fastasleep.substack.com.
And we'll link all of that below to make it easier.
Thank you.
Of course. Awesome. Now your last words of encouragement, and we'll wrap it up.
I would encourage people to realize that the uniqueness of sleep is such an incredible asset that you have and can tap into. There's so much power there. There's so much you can do with your life by making the big decision to analyze your sleep, do something about your sleep, and not just saying, well, I'll drink another cup of coffee or I'll take another pill. If you need to do those things, do them. But in the meantime, start evaluating your sleep. The amount of energy that is inside your mind and body from sound sleep is something, it's incomprehensible. And once you taste it, you will always want that. And that's what's been amazing for me going through my career.
Well, thank you again so much for your time and all your advice and help. And I'm personally going to pick up one of those books for my husband. I'm going to read it and make him try to do it for himself. But again, thank you so much for your time and all the knowledge and all the research you have put into this to help make the world a better place by better sleep. And until next time, thank you to our listeners. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. Please rate and review this podcast. Follow and engage with us on social media under the Yegi Project. And if you're interested in being a guest, email info@theyegiproject.com. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes.